Hey guys, this week we're learning about verbal behavior. Verbal behavior is defined by Skinner as a behavior that is reinforced through the mediation of another person. An example of this could be if a child says water and their mom or teacher gives them a cup of water, that behavior has just been reinforced because another person that wasn't themselves responded and gave them the water. So if a non-example would be if, I said water and, saw a cup of water on the table and grabbed the water, that would not be an example of verbal behavior because there was not a second person to reinforce the behavior of me saying water. So something to keep in mind when thinking about verbal and nonverbal behaviors, it doesn't have to be uh, just spoken words. There's many different types of verbal behavior that's not just speaking out loud. It can be sign language, it could be written words, it could be texting, it could be a communication device. So that doesn't necessarily matter when talking about verbal behavior. Just what matters is that there is a second person mediating the behavior is being reinforced through the mediation of another person. So another example could be with the water example. If I said, water, and the person a person in the room was like, there's no water right now, we can get water later. That's still an example of verbal behavior because that response from another person is what we're looking for, even though they didn't receive the water, they're still getting that reinforcement, that response for speaking or for communicating. And that's the verbal behavior that we're looking at. If I wanted to explain this to someone who doesn't have much of a behavior analytic background, the simplest way to explain this would to just basically explain that anytime that someone asks for something or says something and another person responds to them, that would be verbal behavior. If, I'm just turning on a light switch, I know that's a common example, or, just walking to the bathroom as opposed to asking someone if I could use the bathroom. If I'm doing this on my own without another person present to respond to my verbal request or man tact, anything like that, this would be not an example of verbal behavior. So the take home point of an example of verbal behavior versus not an example of verbal behavior would be that second person. That second person needs to be there to be able to reinforce that verbal behavior.